At the airport that morning, Angela felt relief when she finally spotted a seat near her gate. The place was packed, with travelers hurrying in every direction, children crying, and announcements echoing across the terminal. She carried a small tote bag and a book she had been trying to read for days. After standing in line for nearly an hour, she was grateful to lower herself into the chair and rest her tired legs. The seat was nothing special, plastic with a thin cushion, but to her, it felt like a small gift in a long day of travel. Angela glanced around. Some people were rushing with rolling suitcases, others tapping quickly on their laptops, and a few families huddled together, trying to keep children entertained. She thought to herself how airports were like little cities, everyone different, yet sharing the same space for a short moment. She opened her book and tried to sink into the story, hoping to escape the noise for just a while. It was then that Karen arrived with her teenage daughter. Karen walked with an air of impatience, scanning the waiting area until her eyes locked on Angela's seat. The daughter, about 15, was dragging a carry-on behind her, looking tired but not particularly bothered. Karen, however, stopped right in front of Angela and crossed her arms. "You need to move," Karen said firmly, without greeting, pointing at Angela's chair. "My daughter needs to sit here." Angela looked up from her book, surprised. At first, she thought maybe Karen was joking, but the expression on her face was serious. "I'm sorry," Angela replied softly, "but I've been waiting a long time, and I just sat down. There are other seats a little further down." Karen frowned, as though she couldn't believe someone would deny her request. "You don't understand. My daughter shouldn't have to stand when there's a seat available. It's common courtesy. Get up." Angela felt her heart beat faster. She wasn't trying to cause trouble. She was tired too, and she believed everyone deserved the same chance to rest. "Ma'am," she said in a calm but firm voice, "I was here first. I'm not moving." By now, people around them had started to notice. A man across the aisle lowered his newspaper to watch. Two women with coffee cups exchanged glances. Angela could feel eyes on her, the weight of strangers' curiosity pressing in. Karen's daughter tugged at her mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mom, it's fine. I can stand." But Karen waved her off. "No. You've had a long day, and you deserve to sit." Her voice rose, echoing a little in the terminal. "This woman is being inconsiderate." Angela shifted in her seat, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. She had always believed in treating people with kindness and respect, and she didn't understand why this stranger was determined to make her the villain of the story. She thought of standing up just to end the scene, but something inside her resisted. Why should she give up her seat when she had done nothing wrong? The murmur of voices around them grew. Some passengers whispered to each other, some looked down at their phones as if to avoid the drama, and a few quietly raised their phones to record. The tension spread like a ripple in water, pulling more people's eyes toward the standoff. Angela tried once more, her tone steady. "Your daughter is young. She'll be okay standing for a little while. I really need this seat too." Karen's face flushed. She stepped closer, her words sharp. "Do you think you're more important than my child? People like you should learn some manners." The sting of those words hit Angela, but she held her ground. She wasn't going to let anger pull her into saying something she might regret. She looked at Karen calmly and said, "I am showing manners. I'm sitting quietly in a seat I found first. That's fair." A hush fell for a moment, and then footsteps approached. A tall man in uniform had been passing by, and he stopped just a few steps away. It was Captain Roberts, the pilot for the very flight Angela and Karen were waiting to board. He had been on his way to speak with the gate agent but paused when he caught the heated words. His presence immediately drew attention. Pilots carried a kind of authority in airports that few questioned. He looked at the two women, then at the daughter standing nearby. His expression was calm, but there was a sharpness in his eyes that suggested he understood more than he let on. What seems to be the problem here? Captain Roberts asked, his voice even but commanding enough to silence the whispers in the crowd. Karen straightened, her tone shifting slightly as she addressed him. This woman refuses to give up her seat for my daughter. She's being unreasonable. She spoke as though expecting his agreement, confident that his uniform meant he would side with her. Angela sat quietly, her hands resting in her lap. She didn't jump to explain herself, she simply looked at the pilot, waiting for his response. The air was heavy with expectation. Everyone around leaned in, curious about what the man in uniform would say next. For Angela, it felt like a moment suspended in time. She didn't know if this stranger would defend her or join the pressure against her. But she sat tall, reminding herself that respect wasn't something you begged for, it was something you carried with dignity. And in that silent pause before the pilot spoke, the entire waiting area seemed to hold its breath. And another trying to take it from her. That's not respect. And in this airport, respect matters. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. The confidence she carried moments ago seemed to crumble. She realized the tide of opinion had shifted. People weren't on her side anymore, they were quietly siding with Angela. Angela sat still, but inside, she felt a mix of relief and nervousness. She hadn't wanted a confrontation, but she also knew standing her ground was necessary. It wasn't about the seat anymore, it was about dignity. She thought about how often people like her had to fight quietly for the same simple respect others took for granted. The terminal buzzed softly again as conversations picked back up, though many eyes still lingered on the scene. The tension wasn't gone, but it had shifted. Angela was no longer the one on trial. Karen was. And then, something flickered in the pilot's eyes. He looked at Angela more closely, his brow furrowing in recognition. He paused as though a memory had surfaced, something from years ago. Angela noticed his gaze but didn't understand it yet. She tilted her head slightly, waiting to see what he would say next. The crowd leaned in once more, sensing that the story wasn't over, that something unexpected was about to be revealed. Captain Roberts kept looking at Angela with a strange expression, as though a memory was rising from the back of his mind. The crowd noticed the change in his face, and for a moment, the noise of the airport seemed to fade. He took a small step closer, studying her carefully. Angela shifted slightly in her chair, unsure why the pilot was staring. She wondered if she had done something wrong, but his eyes didn't carry judgment, they carried recognition. Karen folded her arms tightly, impatient. Well? Aren't you going to do something about her? She's being impossible, she said, her voice sharp, trying to pull the pilot's attention back. But Captain Roberts didn't answer her right away. Instead, he spoke gently to Angela. Excuse me, he said, his tone softer than before, but, have we met before? Angela blinked in surprise. I don't think so, she replied politely. I don't know many pilots. She gave a small, uncertain smile, wondering where this was going. The pilot tilted his head, clearly digging through memories. You worked at a community center years ago, didn't you? On the east side of the city? A place where young people would come after school. Angela froze. Her breath caught for a moment. Yes, she said slowly. I volunteered at Hope Haven Community Center for many years. I ran tutoring sessions and sometimes the evening meal program. But that was a long time ago. A murmur spread through the passengers sitting nearby. They leaned closer, sensing that something important was unfolding. The pilot's face lit with recognition. I knew it. You were there. You helped me once. I'll never forget it. His voice grew more emotional, steady but filled with meaning. When I was a teenager, I was on the wrong path. I came to that center one evening, angry at the world. You sat with me, even though I didn't want to talk. You gave me a hot meal, and you told me that life could be different. You said, don't give up on yourself. One day, you'll surprise even you. Angela gasped softly. She remembered countless young people who had come through those doors, each with their own struggles. She had tried to encourage every one of them. Her eyes softened. You were one of the boys who used to sit at the back of the room, weren't you? You didn't talk much, but you always listened. I remember your eyes. Captain Roberts nodded firmly. That was me. And those words stayed with me. They helped me turn my life around. I stayed in school, worked hard, and eventually became a pilot. I've carried that memory all these years. And now, here we are again. The waiting area was silent. People looked from Angela to the pilot, amazed by the unexpected connection. A few smiled warmly, others whispered things like, "Wow, what are the chances?" Karen's mouth opened in shock. She had expected the pilot to dismiss Angela, not reveal that she had once played a role in shaping his life. Her confidence drained quickly, replaced by disbelief. Angela felt a lump in her throat. She had never expected such a small act of kindness from years ago to return to her in this way. She looked at the pilot, her eyes moist. I never knew what happened to you. I always hoped those kids found their way. You changed my path, the pilot said firmly. And today, I'm grateful to finally thank you. The crowd erupted in quiet applause. Some clapped softly, others nodded with approval. The atmosphere in the terminal shifted completely from tension to admiration. Angela sat back in her seat, humbled. She hadn't asked for attention or recognition, but the truth had come out naturally. Karen, meanwhile, shifted nervously under the eyes of strangers. She felt the weight of judgment pressing against her. What had started as her attempt to shame Angela had turned into her own public embarrassment. Angela remained graceful. She didn't smirk or gloat. Instead, she looked at Karen with calm eyes, as though silently saying, "This is why respect matters." Karen's daughter tugged again at her sleeve, whispering, "Mom, please, let's just sit somewhere else." But Karen didn't move right away. Her pride had been wounded, and she didn't know how to repair the moment. She avoided Angela's gaze, staring instead at the floor, wishing she could disappear. The pilot cleared his throat, addressing everyone. This is a reminder that we don't always know who we're speaking to. The stranger in front of you may have once done something that changed a life forever. Respect isn't optional, it's essential. His words sank deeply into the crowd, into Karen, and even into Angela herself. Angela's heart swelled, not with pride, but with gratitude. She thought about how simple gestures, offering food, listening, encouraging someone, could ripple out further than one could ever imagine. As Karen shifted uncomfortably, Angela didn't look away. She sat tall, knowing that the truth had spoken louder than any defense she could have given. And in that moment, the balance had shifted completely. The mother who once demanded the seat now stood in silence, while the woman she tried to dismiss had become a symbol of quiet dignity and remembered kindness. The passengers could feel that the story wasn't over yet. They waited, curious to see what Karen would do next, and whether she would finally lower her pride. The terminal stayed quiet after the pilot spoke about the past. People sat with their coffee cups half raised, their bags half zipped, their attention fully fixed on the three of them. For a few seconds, even the rolling wheels of suitcases seemed to hush. Angela kept her hands folded on her tote bag and breathed slowly. She did not feel bigger than anyone. She simply felt seen. Captain Roberts took a careful breath too. He was no longer just a uniform in that moment, he was a person remembering a winter evening years ago. He looked at Angela the way someone looks at a distant shore they finally reach. "I remember the smell of soup," he said gently, almost to himself, but everyone could hear. "It was cold outside, and I came in angry and hungry. You set a bowl in front of me and asked nothing in return. Later you brought a stack of library forms and said, 'Let's get you a card, so you can borrow as many books as you want.' You sat with me until closing." Angela's mouth softened into a small, warm smile. She nodded once. We always kept the soup hot, she said. It made people stay long enough to feel safe. Karen stood nearby, unsure where to look. Her daughter stayed close to her side, fingers curled around the handle of her carry-on. The girl's eyes were wide, taking everything in. She was hearing not just a pilot's story, but a lesson, one that was walking around right in front of her. The gate agent approached, cautious but kind. "Captain, everything okay here?" she asked in a low voice. "Everything's fine," he said with a calm smile. Then he turned slightly so the agent could see Angela. "Could you please make sure Miss Angela is comfortable while we board later? She's someone who once helped me find my way." His tone was matter-of-fact, respectful, not showy. The agent's eyes lit up. "Of course," she said. "Ma'am, can I get you some water? Maybe a different seat if you prefer something quieter." Angela shook her head politely. "Thank you, I'm all right here." A ripple of human kindness moved through the waiting area. An older gentleman stood up a few seats away and spoke toward Karen's daughter, his voice gentle. "Young lady, would you like my seat? I'm stretching my legs anyway." He smiled, not to prove a point but to share a simple solution. The girl looked to her mother for permission. Karen hesitated, pride tugging one way and a new humility tugging the other. Finally she nodded, barely. The daughter sat, whispering, "Thank you, sir." The man nodded and stepped aside, leaning against a pillar with a relaxed posture. No one had lost anything. Someone had simply given, and the room felt lighter. Captain Roberts glanced back at Angela. "I used to ride my bike to the airport fence," he said, almost laughing at the memory. "I'd stand there for an hour and watch the planes. One day, the community center arranged a field trip, and they let us sit in a simulator. It stopped feeling like a fantasy after that. It felt possible." "I remember those sign-up sheets," Angela said. "We posted them on the bulletin board. Your name was written small, like you didn't want to draw attention." He smiled. "I was afraid to hope out loud." He turned and faced the small circle of listeners who had gathered. "Sometimes, that's all people need, permission to hope, and someone who treats them with equal worth." The gate agent quietly radioed a colleague. A few minutes later, 2 foldable chairs appeared, rolled out from a storage room. The staff set them near the window without fuss, just practical kindness. The crowd seemed almost relieved by such a simple fix. The problem had never truly been about a lack of seats. It had been about a lack of patience and respect. Karen watched all of this with a heart that felt tight. She could feel the hot blush of earlier embarrassment cooling into something else, something heavier, the awareness that she had been unfair. She had come into the gate area frustrated, delayed flights, a missed snack, a worry about a connection. She had focused that stress on a stranger who had done nothing wrong. None of that was a good reason, and she knew it. Her daughter leaned closer and spoke softly, "Mom, can we just say sorry?" The words were light as feathers but landed with weight. Karen tried to answer, but her throat felt dry. She was used to being the one who was right, the one who stood up for her child, the one who didn't back down. But standing up for your child didn't have to mean stepping on someone else. She could see that now. She glanced at Angela, who met her eyes without a trace of anger. The lack of anger made it harder to hold on to pride. Angela thought of the center again, of boys and girls hiding behind loud voices or quiet faces, both kinds bracing for judgment. She had learned, over time, that gentle steadiness calms a storm faster than a raised voice. So she did what she had always done, she waited. Not to punish, but to give space for the better choice to appear. A little boy across the aisle waved at the pilot, and the pilot waved back. The terminal sounds began to rise again: announcement chimes, zipper pulls, a burst of laughter from a family near the snack kiosk. Life pressed forward, but the moment still held a bright circle around these 4 people. Captain Roberts looked at Karen and spoke in the same steady tone he had used all along. "We all have hard travel days," he said. "I've had them in uniform and out of uniform. I've said things I wish I could take back. A teacher once pulled me aside after misjudging me and said, 'I'm sorry. I was wrong about you.' I never forgot how that felt. It gave me room to be better, not bitter." Karen swallowed. The words found their mark because they were kind, not sharp. The pilot looked to the gate agent and added, "Could we also make an announcement shortly? Just a quick note before boarding." "Of course," the agent said. "We can do a short message right before the pre-board call." He nodded and turned back to Angela. "I'd like to say thank you properly," he said. "Not to put you on the spot, but so people remember that small kindness builds big flights." Angela's smile was small but real. "Only if it helps someone feel braver today," she said. "It will," he answered. More people settled in. The older gentleman who had given up his seat had found a comfortable place against the window, watching planes taxi in the afternoon light. A college student nearby closed her laptop, as if wanting to be fully present. A couple trading turns with a toddler exchanged a glance that said, "We needed this reminder." Karen's daughter shifted in her newly offered seat and looked up at Angela. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, words barely louder than a breath. "I didn't want this." "Thank you for staying calm." Angela's eyes softened. "It's okay, sweetie," she replied. "Travel is tiring. You're doing just fine." The girl managed a small smile and squeezed her mother's hand. Karen felt the squeeze and understood it as a tug toward the right choice. Captain Roberts checked his watch. Duty was calling him back to the flight deck. But before he stepped away, he spoke once more, gently, to Karen. "Passengers often ask me what keeps planes in the air," he said. "They expect me to talk about engines and wings. Those matter, of course. But what really keeps a journey safe is respect between crews and passengers, between passengers themselves. When respect moves through a cabin, the whole plane travels better." He didn't wait for a reply. He didn't demand one. He gave a small respectful nod to Angela, to Karen, to the daughter, and to the waiting area, then walked toward the jet bridge door. As he reached the podium, he spoke with the gate agent for a moment, and they both glanced back toward Angela with warm faces. Karen stood very still. She could feel the crowd's attention softening, not judging now, just waiting to see if she would step across the small, invisible line between pride and humility. She had thought strength meant never backing down. Now she saw another kind of strength, the kind that admits a mistake and tries to mend it. She looked at her daughter, who gave her an encouraging nod. She looked at Angela, who simply held her gaze with patience. No one pushed her. No one laughed. The room felt like a hand held out. The speaker at the gate clicked on, and the gate agent's friendly voice floated over the area. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin boarding in a few minutes. Before we do, Captain Roberts would like to share a brief message." A hush gathered again. The pilot stepped to the side of the podium, not towering, just present. He looked out at the passengers as if they were a crew, and he was about to give them the simplest pre-flight checklist there was. "Before we travel together," he said, "I want to thank someone who once helped me start my journey." She didn't know it then. She knows now. His eyes moved toward Angela. "Today's reminder is simple, we all arrive tired sometimes, but we can still choose kindness. When we do, a long day becomes lighter." He paused, and the room breathed with him. Down by the seats, Karen's fingers tightened around her boarding passes. Her heart thumped, not from fear, but from the feeling that this was her moment to set things right. She took one small step forward, then another, as if learning how to walk in a new way. Angela watched her, calm as ever, ready to receive whatever came next. Karen stood frozen, the boarding passes trembling in her hand. Around her, the gate felt like it was waiting hundreds of travelers, some sipping coffee, some balancing bags, all still enough to sense the weight of the moment. It wasn't the kind of silence filled with judgment. It was the kind filled with expectation, giving her a chance to choose the next step. Her daughter squeezed her hand again, whispering, "Mom, please." That soft, hopeful voice pierced through Karen's pride more deeply than any lecture could. She swallowed hard, her throat tight. For the first time that day, she let go of the need to look right and focused instead on being true. Slowly, Karen walked toward Angela. Every step felt heavier than luggage. When she finally stopped in front of her, her voice came out smaller than anyone expected. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I was wrong to ask you to move. I was frustrated, and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. I'm sorry." Angela's expression remained calm, steady. She didn't cross her arms or lean away. She simply looked at Karen with the same gentle patience she had shown all along. After a pause, she nodded. "Respect goes both ways," she said softly. Those words weren't sharp, they were simple, but they carried weight. They weren't just for Karen. They were for everyone within earshot. The waiting area breathed again, like a held note finally released. People shifted, smiled faintly, and some even clapped. Not the loud, sarcastic kind of clapping, but the warm kind that rises when people witness a better ending than they expected. Karen's daughter looked relieved. She whispered, "Thank you," to Angela before settling back in her seat. Angela offered a small smile to the girl. "Safe travels," she said, her tone kind, not bitter. The gate agent soon announced pre-boarding. Families with small children lined up, followed by passengers who needed extra time. The normal rhythm of travel returned, but the air was lighter, as if a storm had passed and left the sky clear. When Angela's group was called, she gathered her tote bag and book. She stood tall, moving toward the boarding line without hurry. She didn't feel like a hero, and she didn't feel like a victim. She felt like someone who had stayed true to herself. As she scanned her boarding pass, she glanced toward the cockpit door. Captain Roberts was already inside, but she caught a glimpse of him through the open door as he spoke with his co-pilot. Their eyes met for just a second, and he gave her a respectful nod. She returned it with a small smile. Words weren't needed. Inside the plane, Angela settled into her seat by the window. She placed her book in the pocket in front of her and watched the runway lights flicker in the evening air. She thought of the community center years ago, the bowls of soup, the tutoring sessions, the nights when tired kids slowly discovered hope. She had never imagined one of those kids would one day be the pilot of her flight. Life had a way of circling back in the most unexpected ways. A few rows behind, Karen sat quietly with her daughter. She wasn't loud now. She wasn't demanding. She was reflective, her pride stripped back by the day's events. She glanced at her daughter, who leaned against her shoulder. For the first time in a long while, Karen realized her daughter had taught her something. The girl's gentle push toward humility had opened a door that anger never could. As the engines roared to life, Angela looked out the window. The plane lifted, the city shrinking beneath clouds glowing in the fading light. She thought of the lesson written into this journey, that respect and kindness are not favors, they are the very seat we all deserve. When the flight reached cruising altitude, a flight attendant walked down the aisle with the snack cart. She paused by Angela, placing a small packet of cookies and a cup of juice on her tray. "Compliments from the captain," she said with a kind smile. Angela chuckled quietly and whispered, "Tell him thank you." She sipped the juice, the sweetness lingering. The rest of the flight passed in calm. People read books, children dozed, and the soft hum of the engines filled the cabin. For Angela, it was more than just another trip. It was a reminder that the quiet battles of dignity were worth fighting, even when no one else seemed to notice, because sometimes, the right people did notice, and sometimes, life circled back to honor it. Hours later, as the plane landed and the passengers filed out, Angela walked slowly down the jet bridge. Captain Roberts stood at the cockpit door, greeting passengers as they left. When Angela reached him, he extended his hand warmly. "Thank you," he said again. His voice carried no formality, only sincerity. Angela shook his hand gently. "Keep flying steady," she replied. With that, she stepped into the terminal, her tote bag slung over her shoulder, her steps steady and light. Behind her, Karen and her daughter followed. Karen paused just long enough to glance at Angela's back. She whispered something to herself, something her daughter heard. "I'll do better." The girl smiled softly and nodded. And as the crowd spilled into the new city, each person carried away a memory of that day. Some would forget by tomorrow. But others, the girl, the pilot, and Angela most of all, would never forget the lesson.